My name's Cherie Wilkins. I have been at Eagle's Nest for over 8 years. My dad was in the military, so we moved around. So when I was younger, I don't really know the actual churches that we were going to. I do know that when my mom worked, because she was a nurse, if she worked on a Sunday or a holiday, that my dad, that was a big thing. My dad made sure we went to church. He wasn't one of those dads with, now I guess it's more common for a dad to take his kids, but back then it was more the mom's responsibility to do things with the children, and he made us, get to church. So when I was in elementary school, there was a family down the street that had a Bible study like once a week, and I would go there, and I accepted Jesus then, and I was very young in elementary school. We attended what was a Dutch Reformed church. And when I moved to Delaware, my preacher said, well, the Dutch didn't make it in Delaware, so there's no Dutch Reformed church. He said, find a good Methodist church, you'll be fine. Well, I had originally visited Eagle's Nest, and I thought it was too big for me. And so I found a smaller church. And then over time, I was visiting with friends of mine, their church one summer. And it was a larger church, and I kind of got used to the larger church there. So when I went back to my church, there was some changes in the pastors and such, and I didn't feel comfortable staying there anymore. So I called a friend of mine, Jill, and asked her where her and her husband, Matt, were attending church, and they said Eagle's Nest. And I said, okay, I will see you Sunday. And I think going to the other large church was what made me more comfortable coming back here. I believe it was 2015. I just felt God wanted me to volunteer. And I didn't know what exactly, but I started to look at the church bulletin, and I would see things about child care. And I know how different my children are from each other. I thought there's no way I could handle a whole class. And I didn't really think that I should be a greeter. So I looked for something else, and finally it said production, no experience necessary. And I was like, that must be me. So I signed up. I was trained on how to run the camera and really loved it. And I think everybody should want to do this. So it's been a nice experience. So for a Sunday, I would look up the songs, and I print out the words, and then I would watch a live video where there's musicians instead of just the lyrics. We want live footage so I can see when they're panning in. Maybe this would be a good space in this instrumental for a drum shot or the guitar, or what's really loud here. Me, as not being a musically trained person, I know what the audience is probably looking for. If they're similar to me, they'd be like, oh, I really like that guitar, so let's focus on that. So I go through each song and kind of make a draft of what I think it would be. Also, our musicians are different, and the setup is different. So, but it gives you a nice, I think, background. At least we're not going in blind. It goes back to when I was a child. My best friend, who I'm still friends with, she has a vision problem, and she's almost legally blind now at this point. And she won't go to a church because she really can't see enough to walk around, but she watches TV preachers. So I just feel it's kind of that there are a lot of people. She's not the only one that can't get to church. There's a lot of people out there, and if they could see something like this, we could get the word out. So I never thought it would be out to hundreds or 1,000 people, but it is now. So we're definitely moving, and that's really why, that's the satisfaction. I feel there's people like her out there. In 1998, I was pregnant with my second child, and I received a phone call from my doctor, and he said, there's a problem with the baby. We have this test result back. He said it's the highest test result I've ever seen, so I'm pretty sure there's a problem with an internal organ. And I said, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What are we talking about? And he said, well, it could be anything, heart, liver. The baby might not survive. It could be born without a brain. It would live for a few hours. You could hold the baby. And he said, I'd like to do level 2 sonograms every 2 weeks, and we'll look for things. We'll look for symmetry in the left and right side of the brain. We'll look at ratios between, if the heart is this size, the stomach should be this size. We'll look for things and make sure that everything looks good. So, of course, I immediately left work. I was upset. I called my husband at the time, and I called one of my friends. Her mom ran the prayer chain at our church, and asked them to put us on that prayer chain. We went in to have a meeting with the doctor, and the nurse was also in the room too. And they said we had options. They said, you could abort the baby. And I said no. And I was 100% sure every ounce of me wanted to have this child. There was no doubt. They said we could do amniocentesis, which is where they take a little bit of the fluid out of the uterus and check for issues, and it gives them a better feel about what's wrong. But at the time, there was a 3% chance you could lose the baby. So I said no. They also said, well, you can go to genetic counseling. And the nurse started typing on her computer she was going to set up an appointment. And I said, no. So she looked at me and she said, well, if you're not going to do these things, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to pray about it. And we're going to have the baby. Over the next few weeks, I actually had friends and even a family member say, Cherie, you don't need to have this baby. You don't have to prove something. Like, you could just start over. And I was just kind of surprised. So I thought, well, what can I do? What action can I take to have a healthy baby? I couldn't have a surgery to fix the baby. There was no magic pill to fix the baby. I just really didn't know what action I could take in order to have a healthy baby. But I knew I could pray about it. I could work on my faith. So I did start to go to church more. And I went to Bible study after church, and I even taught a Bible study, and I volunteered at church. So I thought I was mature in my Christian walk, but I realized by the end of this journey that I was just an infant at this time, and there was so much more growth. In May of 1999, I had a 9-pound, 5-ounce, healthy baby girl. Natural birth, no epidural, and that is God's work right there. So, if you want to know how she's doing now, she just graduated college with her bachelor's degree, so she's definitely fine in that aspect. And physically, she also minored in dance, so she's very healthy and living a great Christian life, and she just started a new job. And also, of course, she wants to be a middle school teacher, so I think there might be a little bit of craziness up there, but she's good.